Once upon a time, there was an attraction that not only changed the roller coaster business forever, but it also saved the park where it was built. This is the story of that ride. The story of Space Mountain, from the Earth to the Moon. In 1984, Disney, which was fully focused on international parks, wanted to expand into the European market. A new EuroDisney was a top priority, and among the many suitable sites, 2 countries wanted a mouse for themselves. After a war over a new Disneyland between Spain and France, the French made an offer so good that Eisner, the CEO of that time, had to agree. Disney was so thrilled with the bargain, one official called it the deal of the century. So, Michael Eisner, the CEO, and Frank Wells, the president of the Walt Disney Company, sat down with the French government and made it official. Disneyland is to be built in Paris, France. A few years passed, and after investing far more than originally planned, EuroDisney was ready to open, with 29 attractions, 6 hotels, a 190,000-foot entertainment district, a campground, and a 27-hole golf course. All of this came at a heavy price, but one that Disney wasn't too worried about, as they believed the resort would be a big success, just like the new Tokyo Disney Resort, which had welcomed more than 10 million guests in its first year of operation in 1984. EuroDisney president Robert Fitzpatrick commented, "My biggest fear is that it will be too successful." The financial community agreed, with Margot Vignolo of Salomon Brothers saying, "I don't think it can miss. They are masters of marketing. When the place opens, it will be perfect. And they know how to make people smile. Even the French."
Et maintenant, je déclare EuroDisney officiellement ouvert.
It's April 21st, 1992. EuroDisney is opening and all of Europe is excited about the newest Disneyland. Disney felt it couldn't fail. The park was fantastic, some even saying it was the most beautiful Disney park in the world. But that's exactly what happened. In the first 6 months of operation, the resort made a loss of over 50 million euros and had to ask Disney for emergency funding. Now, if we go back a while, when the park was planned and designed, Imagineers left out huge parcels of land for future development, aka Phase 2. Most of those parcels already had an attraction planned for them. Looking at this fun map from the opening, we can see several of these planned attractions that are yet to be built to this day. At the top of Adventureland was to be a giant mine train, probably themed to Indiana Jones, which later became the cheaper ride we know today. Most of the site is still there, waiting for something. Other attractions would be a Beauty and the Beast attraction in Fantasyland and the Little Mermaid Dark Ride, also in Fantasyland. But now, let's get to what we're actually interested in, Discovery Mountain. Back to 1992, Discoveryland was missing something. It had some attractions like Autopia, Le Visionarium, or as it was called in America, The Timekeeper, Star Tours, and Captain EO. But it was missing something. Right in the middle of this land, there was one of those huge plots of land that still needed to be filled in. And the Imagineers had big plans for a pavilion-like building to be built right here. The earlier plans were bigger and more ambitious, and consisted of not only one attraction, but several. There would have been an incredible looking mountain, but inside, things were even more special. The massive mountain would house Captain Nemo's Nautilus, with an underwater restaurant, an upgraded version of Epcot's highly acclaimed Horizons attraction, yes, that's Horizons, a drop tower themed around Journey to the Center of the Earth by none other than Jules Verne, and finally a new space mountain, themed around Jules Verne's De la Terre à la Lune. The massive building would also have been connected to Videopolis. The foundations for these overhead walkways were built and now serve as a location for the statue of Wall-E. The connection to the restaurant would have been through these windows. Since the opening was, shall we say, not favorable, Disney had to not only cut budgets everywhere, but also save their new park. And that happened with Space Mountain. Disney greenlit the project, but unfortunately it never came to fruition, at least not on that scale. The team consisted of some of the most famous Imagineers of all time, including names like Tony Baxter, Eddie Sato, and Steve Branson, who was a composer for the fantastic soundtrack. But if there's anyone who deserves the most credit, it's Tim Delaney, who was the executive designer for Space Mountain, but also the Imagineer responsible for Discoveryland. This Space Mountain is unlike any other attraction. Its retro-futuristic design, also called steampunk, reflects the late 19th century and its fascination with science and wonderful mechanical devices. A mix of Imagineering and art, metal beams and reinforcements and plates screwed into the mountain with copper reflections that are decorated with stars, moons, and other celestial images. Even though the attraction has changed a lot over the time, this aesthetic has remained a constant that's made its reputation. Another element not found in other space mountains is the gigantic Columbiad cannon that carries the weapons of the Baltimore Gun Club, not forgetting the majestic goddess Luna. On top of that, Space Mountain was the first roller coaster in the dark with a revolutionary onboard audio system. After Imagineers designed the show building and ride, they used a computer and a modified flight simulator to test the track. Do you recognize this flight simulator? That's because it's a Star Tours ride vehicle. In January 1993, construction began on this major new e-ticket attraction, and with it, hopes for a new era at Disneyland Paris. About 20 months later, in September 1994, construction was completed, but the attraction didn't open until May 1995. An important part of the new attraction was to be the music. Composer Steve Branson was chosen for the job. Inspired by the music of John Williams and the movie 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, he wrote the entire Space Mountain soundtrack, which includes not only the music in the ride, but also that in the queue. The first music is very calm, describing space from its discovery to its admiration. It was written for the atmosphere in the queue. The second music, on the other hand, is the opposite of the first, to describe the very eventful journey of the guests. In an interview, Steve Branson said that he hated the roller coaster, but had to ride several times to adapt and perfect the music to the tracks and story. One idea that remained from the original concept was having various attractions. Although they weren't rides, two walk-through attractions were built at the same time. The first was the Mysteries of the Nautilus, where you walk through Captain Nemo's submarine and meet the Kraken. This one still exists in the park today. Then there was a second attraction, the Stellar Way. This was an observation walkway that led through the interior of Space Mountain at ground level. This offering gave the not-so-brave a view of the amazing space and the coming ride vehicles. Unfortunately, it closed, and the walkway was used as a fast-pass queue when this was introduced at the resort. By the end of construction, the brand new ride was to be called Discovery Mountain, not Space Mountain. This change was made so late in development that when the ride opened, all handrails and the entire queue were labeled DM instead of SM. Excited guests pass by the entrance of Space Mountain and begin their journey by waiting in line along the Stellar Way, feeling as if they're in a field of floating asteroids. Sometimes a meteor shower begins, and they see meteors shoot by and hear the thump on the roof as they fall on them. Every now and then, a bang is heard, and a rocket train flies through space. Then, the guests enter a grand room decorated with rich wood and lit by celestial chandeliers. After passing by this room, they enter a beautiful replica of a Victorian exhibition hall, with French flags moving in the wind. Here, the Baltimore Gun Club invites guests to participate in a reenactment of their historic shot to the moon. And finally, the even now more anxious guests climb into their vehicles and hold on tight as they head into the Columbiad's barrel. The train now stops at the base of the giant cannon, which opens and closes certain parts to make sure everything is ready for the blast. After some nervous waiting, the cannon explodes, and the smoke, and more importantly the guests, are shot to the top of the mountain in a heart-pounding 2.2 seconds. Once at the top, they experience a brief moment of weightlessness, before descending into the mountain for the high-speed ride of a lifetime. The vehicle flies past a series of breathtaking encounters, hits a large meteor that sends real sparks flying through space, and then dives into the heart of a molten asteroid. In the path of the train lies a large machine. This whimsical brass apparatus appears to be a meteorite mining machine belonging to the Blue Moon Mining Company. Unfortunately, the train rocket is mistaken for a meteor, and with much blasting, it's sucked into the machine. The rocket train narrowly escapes and continues to race under and around celestial bodies on its spectacular journey. The train eventually finds the moon smiling down on the guests, who head back in the most thrilling and tumultuous way after this close encounter. After passing more meteors and dark space, the amazing electro-develocitor catches the rocket train and stops it, while triumphant music plays and guests return safely to Earth. After an amazing marketing campaign with captivating trailers, millions of apprentice astronauts eagerly await the inauguration, which took place on May 31st, 1995. On that day, Disneyland Park was the site of a memorable celebration under the stars, and brought together some amazing people, including an astronaut, a real one. Buzz Aldrin, the second man to ever land on the moon. He was the best to ride a brand new roller coaster that will allow many more people to travel to the moon. To the sounds of music from science fiction movies, 6,000 guests were welcomed, ready to participate in the launch party. The monstrous size of the Columbiad surprised, the architecture fascinated, and the guests found themselves in Jules Verne's story, just minutes before the cannon was fired. The time of launch is near. Roy Disney and Philippe Bourguignon, executive director of EuroDisney, declare the conquest of space open and smash a bottle of champagne in the huge shell, from which a Jules Verne appears to see his futuristic dream come true. The night closes in, and the first people get ready to fly to the moon. With them go some famous names like Michael Jackson, Sylvester Stallone, Jean Reno, David Copperfield, Claudia Schiffer, the real astronaut Buzz Aldrin, and many others. The professional in real space commented that the ride was technically perfect, and that in Space Mountain were catapulted into space and traveled in all directions, while in a real rocket, we stay in bed practically all the time. After that incredible opening day and evening, the attraction opened to the public on July 1st, 1995 to rave reviews. Space Mountain de la Terre à la Lune was a huge success, and for the first time ever, Disneyland Paris made a profit, of $22.8 million that year. For nearly a decade, it was the major e-ticket and remained reasonably untouched until January 2005, when Disney needed Space Mountain to help financially again, but this time for the worse. For its 10th birthday, the story was completely redesigned. Now guests embark on a new journey to the frontiers of the universe. The Columbiad cannon, invented by Jules Verne, has been recalibrated, and the vehicles are now catapulted from the lower part of the barrel. Using the tremendous energy of the launch and acceleration, after a brief moment of weightlessness, the travelers enter directly into space, with a mission to explore the ends of space and unlock the secrets that lie within the boundaries of the universe. On the way, they cross the path of asteroids, comets, and a magnificent supernova. This new version of the ride opened to the public on April 9, 2005. While the ride itself received nothing new but new projection effects, music and lights, it delighted guests. One visitor said at the opening, "The effects are superb. The impression of striking speed and the music helps to accentuate the impression of adventure." Over time, and due to a lack of investment in the European resort, the parks and rides began to look less than their best. Disneyland Paris gradually lost its charm. It was sold off to investors, and Disney lost a large part of EuroDisney SCA, the company that owned the resort. But in a turn of events, the company was restructured, with the Walt Disney Company injecting 420 million euros. This was the beginning of Bob Iger's plan to buy back the resort. During this time, a phased project began to renovate most of the attractions that were in dire need of overhaul. One of them was Space Mountain, where the first phase of the project began in 2015, bringing some changes such as a single rider line. A year and a half passes, and in June 2017, Iger makes it official. The Walt Disney Company is now the sole owner of Disneyland Paris, after buying the entirety of EuroDisney SCA back from investors. With this announcement came new investments that really brought the magic back to the parks, and Space Mountain, like many others, was to receive a major renovation. Phase 2 of the project included more thorough work, improving more technical aspects. The beloved space-themed roller coaster would receive a new storyline and theme, this time from the Star Wars universe. The coaster would also receive new ride vehicles, as the older ones were getting rougher with time. However, these weren't Star Wars themed, but had several images and logos reminiscent of the original De la Terre à la Lune attraction, confirming that Star Wars was just a temporary overlay, just like in the other parks. Or so we thought. In this new version, guests are immersed in a brand new atmosphere that feels like a real Star Wars battle. Epic Star Wars music plays in the background of this new galactic adventure. This was a very much needed renovation that brought smoothness and overall a better ride experience. At the end of the day, Space Mountain has thrilled millions of guests. From the time it was being planned, it was under a lot of pressure to be the ride that saves EuroDisney. And even under that pressure, the amazing team of Imagineers managed to pull off one of the most important twists in the resort's history, ensuring that it would live on. Sure, there have been ups and downs, and many guests insist on the return of the original, after the temporary overlay being not so temporary after all. To them, I quote Jules Verne, as he once said, "How many things have been denied one day, only to become realities the next?" So, don't lose hope just yet, as the moon might be closer than we think. Hi everyone, thank you so much for watching this video. It was the longest video I've ever made, so I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider subscribing and liking. And if you're interested, make sure to check our fan shop. I'd like to give a huge thank you to the people behind the website spacemountain.fr for allowing me to make this video. If you want, you can find a lot more information about this incredible attraction on their website, listed down below. I also want to thank SMDLTALL on Twitter for allowing me to use their photos and videos. And now, as always, thank you for watching, and that's a wrap.